Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 278, Leon Edwards brutally head kick KO'd Kamaru Usman in the 5th round with 56 seconds remaining to claim the undisputed UFC welterweight title. And since this massive victory by Leon Edwards, there's been a lot of speculation on what should be next for Leon Edwards and who he should try to make his first title defense against. There's been talk of the immediate rematch for Kamaru Usman, which would be a trilogy fight. There's been talk about a Khamzat Chimaev fight, which would be super interesting because they had 3 fights canceled in the past. But that's if Khamzat Chimaev beats Nate Diaz at UFC 279, which I believe he will. There's been talk of the Nate Diaz fight. If somehow Nate Diaz pulls off an incredible upset at UFC 279 and beats Khamzat Chimaev, there's talk of doing Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz too. There's been talk of Jorge Masvidal versus Leon Edwards, which would just be insanity, but there is that whole backstory from 2019 where they got into that backstage altercation, and people have wanted to see that fight since. There's also been talk about Colby Covington potentially getting the next title shot. He had a close fight with Kamaru Usman back in November. Since then, he got a dominant win over Jorge Masvidal at UFC 272. So some people are saying, Colby Covington deserves a shot at the title next. So first off, starting off with the most ridiculous claim to a title shot, Jorge Masvidal. There are some people who want to see Leon Edwards attempt to make his first title defense against Jorge Masvidal. And this is the most ridiculous claim I've ever heard. Jorge Masvidal is saying, we accept online. He's tweeting that out. He's saying, I want the title fight. I'm going to be the welterweight champion soon enough. And I know when Kamaru Usman lost his belt, I know Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal were all licking their lips because they thought, okay, now I got a fresh lease on life in the welterweight division. But there is no, person who is connected to reality that should think Jorge Masvidal should get a welterweight title shot. He is on a 3-fight losing streak. He got dominated by Kamaru Usman and lost 50-45. Then he got an immediate rematch because that fight was on a little bit of short notice. He got slept by Kamaru Usman in a fight that he had almost no success in. And then he goes out there at UFC 272 back in March and he gets dominated by Colby Covington. How can you give a guy who's lost 3 fights in a row rather decisively, they haven't been controversial at all, how could you give him a title shot? I just think that's delusional just because Leon Edwards and Jorge Masvidal have this backstage brawl from 2019. That's the reason for giving him the title shot. If they did Leon Edwards versus Jorge Masvidal, I would throw an absolute temper tantrum and I would refuse to watch that fight because, there's a gray area sometimes about guys deserving title shots. But Jorge Masvidal getting a title shot on a 3-fight losing streak where he's been dominated in all 3 fights would just be ridiculous. Moving on to the next option, we have Khamzat Chimaev and or Nate Diaz. So Khamzat Chimaev versus Nate Diaz goes down at UFC 279 in about 2 weeks' time. And most people are anticipating that Khamzat Chimaev will win this fight. And, 99% probability says Khamzat Chimaev will beat Nate Diaz. It's a very favorable matchup for him. Nate Diaz didn't even want the fight. I know people are saying Nate asked for it, but what else is he going to say when the UFC shoved it down his throat? He's going to just own it and say, you know what, I wanted this fight. Really, he just wanted to get out of his contract. So this is a terrible mismatch, and Khamzat Chimaev will probably dominate Nate Diaz, probably stop him in the 1st or 2nd round. And you can already make a claim without the Nate Diaz win that Khamzat Chimaev deserves a shot at the welterweight title. I think if you don't think Khamzat already deserves a title shot, I don't think you can say a win over Nate Diaz has earned him a title shot. Nate Diaz hasn't won a fight since 2019 over Anthony Pettis, okay? He has 1 win since 2019. That's insanity. So a win over Nate Diaz doesn't mean much, even though it seems like everyone who beats Nate Diaz gets a title shot. But Khamzat Chimaev has a win over Gilbert Burns in his most recent fight at UFC 273. And for me, there's a very compelling storyline to make Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev. They had 3 fights booked in the past between 2020 and 2021, and none of those fights came to fruition. So I would love to see this potential matchup. I already think you can make a case for Khamzat Chimaev to get a title shot just because of the win over Gilbert Burns. And then before that, he had a win over Li Jingliang. And the way he's winning so dominantly, especially in that Li Jingliang fight. And then he had that fight of the year candidate against Gilbert Burns this year. And then every fight outside of the Gilbert Burns fight has been so dominant. The Gerald Meerschaert win has aged well. I think you can make a very solid case for Khamzat Chimaev fighting Leon Edwards next. As far as Nate Diaz, I don't care if Nate Diaz somehow beats Khamzat Chimaev. In no world do I want to see Nate Diaz getting a welterweight title shot. And maybe the UFC would do it just because of Nate Diaz's star power. But, I mean, I don't think he wins anyway unless Khamzat gets injured beating him up. But I don't want to see that at all. I know some people are going to say, well, Nate's such a fan favorite and would sell pay-per-views. In no world do I want to see that fight. Now, as far as Colby Covington, you could make a case for Colby Covington. But he's had 2 shots at Kamaru Usman. One he got stopped in. The other he lost by decision. And since then, he only has the 1 win over Jorge Masvidal. So I don't think Colby deserves the shot. He's in witness protection right now after getting sucker punched by Jorge Masvidal. He's been radio silent, really hasn't been talking at all. Khamzat was calling him out for a while. So I really think Colby Covington has to win another fight or so before we can start taking him seriously for a title shot. So really, when you really start looking at all the options, there's only 2 realistic options for Leon Edwards' first title defense. And that's either Khamzat Chimaev with a win over Nate Diaz or Kamaru Usman, the immediate rematch, Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3. And I really think that both of those fights make a lot of sense, but I think you have to go with Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3. And again, you look at that first fight. I did 2 post-fight videos. I'll link them down in the description. Go check them out. But Kamaru Usman won the majority of this fight. And I mean the second fight because they fought so many years ago, back in 2015. But Kamaru Usman clearly won the second, third, fourth, and was winning the 5th round up until he got slept by the head kick. And you have a dominant champion like Kamaru Usman. He had 5 title defenses, and I really think the way the fight went, if Leon Edwards was dominating Kamaru Usman for 5 rounds and then KO'd him at the 5th round, I would say no, Kamaru Usman has to build himself back. But the way the fight went, that Kamaru Usman was winning the majority of the fight, you get down to the last minute and you get clipped with a head kick, even though it was perfectly placed by Leon Edwards. I think you have to do the trilogy. And what a lot of people have been saying that has drove me absolute nuts is, well, Kamaru Usman got brutally KO'd. He's going to need some time off, so Leon Edwards shouldn't sit around in the meantime. That doesn't make any sense. You look at the current pay-per-view schedule for the UFC. UFC 279 coming up in a couple weeks already has a headliner, and obviously it's not going to be Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman 3. Then you look at 280. It's already filled up. Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. You look at 281 at Madison Square Garden. Already filled up. The main event is Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. You look at December, which is 281. You have Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Prochazka for the light heavyweight title. And there's some speculation about a potential John Jones versus Stipe Miocic getting thrown on that card as well. So you start looking at that UFC pay-per-view schedule and you say, when's the next available spot that Leon Edwards could defend his title on? And you start looking and they're booked all the way through December. So the next available spot would be January, which would be UFC 283. Well, UFC 283 is going to be in Brazil. There's no way they're having Leon Edwards defend his welterweight title in Brazil. That's just not happening. So then you look, it's going to be February. February is about 6 months away. There's no reason that we could not get Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3 in February, which is the earliest that Leon Edwards is going to fight anyway. So people saying, well, we don't want to have Leon Edwards sit out. Even if you give Khamzat Chimaev the title shot, it's not going to happen till February or March at best. So if you're waiting that long anyway, almost 6 months, why not do Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3? I think it's the fight you have to do based on how this rematch went, the second fight went at UFC 278. I believe Kamaru Usman should get this rematch. Now, if Kamaru Usman, let's say he tore his ACL in this fight or whatever, and then he got knocked out, I would say, okay, move on with the division because Kamaru Usman's going to be out for over a year. But he's not going to need a year off because he got KO'd. That's not how it goes in MMA at all. People don't take a year off because they get KO'd. Now, do I agree he shouldn't do a quick turnaround, 3 months? But people weren't saying, oh, well, Dustin needs to move on after KOing Conor McGregor. They did the trilogy 6 months later in July. It happened. The second fight happened in January. Dustin Poirier brutally KO'd Conor McGregor. And then they did the trilogy in July at UFC 264. So I see no reason they shouldn't do Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3 in February or March. And I believe Leon Edwards was on Ariel Helwani's show today and says he wants to make his first title defense in March or April in the UK. So March or April, that's even further out. So there's no reason Kamaru Usman couldn't be ready by March or April to fight in this trilogy fight. And not only that, I believe Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3 is one of the biggest fights the UFC can make right now. And that sounds crazy because Leon Edwards isn't a particular star, neither is Kamaru Usman. But I believe Leon Edwards has built his star power ever so slightly with that massive, shocking win at UFC 278, his post-fight interview. He's a very likable, nice guy. And I think on top of that, when you have a dominant champion like Kamaru Usman lose in the shocking fashion that he lost in, people want to see what would happen in an immediate rematch. So I think we absolutely have to see the trilogy. Now, if for some reason Kamaru Usman can't fight in February, March, or April, I say you move on with the division, and then when Kamaru Usman is ready to come back, he can have an immediate title shot. But outside of that, I think you have to do Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 3, and that's the biggest fight you can make right now. It kind of sucks because if Khamzat goes out there and just wrecks Nate Diaz, he's kind of in a weird spot because a lot of people want to see him fight for a title. And if Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman don't fight till February or March, then Khamzat Chimaev is not going to get a title shot till maybe the end or the middle, at best case scenario, of 2023. So I think in the meantime, maybe he can fight Colby Covington after Nate Diaz. I am dying to see Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington. I think that's an amazing fight. And if Colby Covington can defeat Khamzat Chimaev, even if Kamaru Usman somehow reclaims his belt against Leon Edwards, I'd be down to see a trilogy, even though Colby Covington lost both fights. They were both very competitive fights. Even the one he got stopped in was super competitive. And the most recent fight between them at UFC 268 was super competitive. So book that fight in the meantime. We can see on the same card, imagine this, in the UK, March, maybe UFC 284, 285, March of next year, we see headliner Leon Edwards defending his welterweight belt against Kamaru Usman in the trilogy. Co-main event, Colby Covington versus Khamzat Chimaev for the #1 contender spot. Sign me up for that card. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.